Welcome to Cheat Sheet Tale, where secrets slip, lies unravel, and the truth always has a twist. Real stories, raw confessions, and shocking betrayals. Drop a comment if you've ever caught a red flag too late now. Let's get into today's tale. Mom and sister took my daughter to a school fundraiser and told everyone she was just a charity case. We're helping out. My sister whispered, she should be grateful we even claim her. My daughters at a loan as they auctioned off her art. 3 days later, her note made the local news. I used to think that the hardest part of parenting was the logistics, school pickups, balancing work deadlines, with sick days, the endless grind of making sure everything somehow stays on track. But I was wrong. The hardest part is watching someone hurt your child and realizing the people behind it are your own family. This isn't about a stranger being rude or an unfair teacher. This was my mother and my sister, and it was deliberate. They didn't just overstep. They twisted everything I've done for my daughter into a performative pity show while smiling like saints. The tipping point came on a Friday evening at a school fundraiser when I couldn't attend because of work. They took my daughter, Mira, to represent our family. And what they did there left scars I'm still trying to help her heal from. You see, Mira's always been sensitive, not fragile. She's strong in quiet, unexpected ways, but she feels things deeply. She's 12 now. She's had a tough year dealing with my divorce from Darren, her dad, and she's been finding peace through art. We started art therapy a few months ago, and something inside her just opened up when her school invited her to donate some of her pieces to a fundraiser for their arts program. She was nervous but proud. Her work was going to be auctioned off in front of parents and teachers. It felt like a big deal. I had a deadline that night. My mom, May, said she and my younger sister, Jenna, would take Mira and represent the family. We'll make her feel special, she said. Instead, they made her feel like an orphan someone had thrown a blanket over. They told people at the school, other parents, that Mira wasn't really part of the family, that she was a charity case. Someone they were helping out because I couldn't. They told them I was unstable, that she was troubled, that her art was her therapy, and they were doing their best to help her feel normal. My sister, at one point, leaned over to her and whispered, you should be grateful we even claim you. This is what Mira told me later, but only after I found out through the local news. The school posted a feel-good segment on their social media pages, and the local news station picked it up, a soft little human interest piece titled, Family Helps Troubled. Girls Find Voice Through Art. It showed my daughter sitting alone at a table, her artwork displayed behind her, like exhibits in a museum for lost children. The anchor's voiceover said, Lila's family tells us she's been through a lot. They've taken her in, given her a chance at healing. Taken in and gave birth to her. I raised her. I went without sleep and without food and without comfort for her. I survived a gaslighting husband and a devastating divorce to protect her. And here were the women who were supposed to have my back, painting me as unfit and Mira as a burden. I remember going cold. My hand shook as I paused the video. I couldn't move for a long time. I stared at the screen until Wyla came home from school. Her backpack slumped over, one shoulder, her face pale. She saw the video on my phone. I asked her, why didn't you tell me? She looked at me for a long time. Then she said, I thought if I told you, you'd hate them. And I didn't want to be the reason that broke me. I sat her down on the couch, pulled her into my arms, and said, you are never the reason for anyone's cruelty, ever. That night, she gave me a note, something she had written for the school newsletter, but didn't think they'd publish it. Was a letter about what happened at the fundraiser. From her perspective, she wrote about how it felt to hear her family describe her as someone they were helping rather than loving. She described sitting alone while her art was auctioned off like it didn't belong to her. She ended it by saying, I'm not a project, I'm a person. I'm not a charity case. I'm someone who deserves to be known, not claimed. I read it 3 times. Then I emailed it to the school and I sent it to the news station too. I didn't ask permission. I just sent it the next day. It was posted first on the school website, then the local paper picked it up. The story blew up more than I expected, not in a viral kind of way, but in a way that made ripples. Through our community, people started asking questions, teachers reached out, parents emailed me. Even one of the fundraiser organizers apologized for what happened. May called me the next day. You should have handled this privately. She snapped. I said, you humiliated my daughter in public. The least you can do is feel a little embarrassed when the truth comes out. She scoffed, said I was being emotional. Jenna sent a long text, some non-apology full of, we didn't mean it like that. And people took it the wrong way. No, They said what they said, and they meant it. I didn't yell, I didn't insult them, I didn't write a rant on Facebook or start a family feud. I just quietly cut them out of our lives. No more sleepovers at grandma's, no more holidays where I had to hold my tongue. No more pretending that their love came without conditions. What they did wasn't just a misstep. It was a betrayal of trust, of dignity, of Elmira's sense of belonging. And I won't let them do that again after I cut them off. There was a strange silence in our lives. Not a peaceful one at first, more like the ringing in your ears. After something explodes, it took a while for that noise to fade. Mira didn't ask about them. She didn't bring up my mother or Jenna again. She didn't cry over it or act out. But the way she moved around the house, changed lighter, unclenched, as if she had been holding her breath for months, and finally exhaled the backlash within the family. Of course, didn't take long. My cousin Tara messaged me saying I was being dramatic and shouldn't drag private matters into the public. My Abdelma wrote a Facebook status about kids today being too sensitive and how some people can't take a joke anymore. It didn't surprise me that side of the family always had a toxic flavor of loyalty, where silence was a virtue and truth was betrayal. I wasn't playing by their rules anymore. I didn't respond to a single message. I had no interest in debating the validity of my child's dignity, but things weren't all heavy. Mira was changing in front of me in the best way. She started journaling more. She brought home paint. Under her nails, she left little scraps of paper around the house with scribbles and color swatches and tiny affirmations like, I decide how people talk about me. I'm not invisible. Being kind doesn't mean staying quiet. She didn't know I was reading them. I didn't say anything. I just collected them sometimes when I cleaned, smoothed them out, and kept them in a folder I now store in my nightstand. There was a shift at school too. Her art teacher, Ms. Yates, stopped. Me at Pick-a-Pone Day, she's special, she said. Not in that syrupy, condescending way. Adults sometimes use it was quiet, serious, not just her talent, her voice. The other kids look up to her. I told her thank you, not knowing what else to say. It wasn't the compliment that stunned me. It was the fact that someone saw my daughter clearly, without pity or pretense, just saw her. Mira got invited to display some of her work in a small gallery showing through a student initiative with the Montgomery County Arts Council. They picked 3 of her paintings. I didn't tell her about it right away. I waited until we were sitting on the back porch one Saturday morning, sharing a cinnamon roll and watching our neighbor's cat chase shadows. They want to show your work in a gallery? I said casually, like it was no big deal. She blinked. Really? I nodded. They think you're ready. She didn't scream or jump up and down. She just smiled slowly like the sun rising. Can we go see it together? Absolutely. We went that following Friday. The gallery was a modest place, white walls, local artist, energy, warm light. But to us, it was a cathedral. She stood in front of her framed pieces like she'd stepped into a version of herself she didn't fully know yet. Confidence rooted, real. One piece in particular caught people's attention. It was a watercolor of a tree split down the middle. One side was vibrant and green, the other bare and splintered. But the roots were tangled together beneath both sides. The title, What You Don't See a Woman in a Long Cardigan, stood in front of it for a long time. She turned to Mira and said, This feels like the truth. Mira nodded. It is after the gallery event. I asked if she wanted to go out to dinner. Maybe celebrate, she said. Can we go get pho instead? I don't want to be fancy, I just want to be cozy. So we went to Pho 75 on University Boulevard, sat in a booth. With our backs to the wall and slurped noodles in comfortable silence. Halfway through her bowl, she looked up and said, I'm glad you didn't make me see them again. I nodded. Me too, even if they don't ever say sorry. I took a breath. Sometimes people never do, but that doesn't mean they didn't do something wrong. She let that sit for a minute. Then she said, I don't think I miss them. You don't have to. I said, because here's what I've learned, and I wish someone had told me this 20 years ago, when I was trying so hard to please everyone in my life. You don't owe your peace to people who profit off your pain. Mira understood that before I ever did. The weeks that followed were calm, in the way only a storm survivor would recognize, quiet, but full of the kind of silence that means something. Not the silence of tension, but of space of healing. Mira began putting her focus into school again. Not because she had to, but because she wanted to. I noticed little things. Her backpack stayed organized. Her notes got neater, and she started volunteering to read aloud in class. Her teachers noticed too. I started getting messages like, Layla seems more grounded lately, and she's really coming into her own. At home, she painted constantly. She filled every spare moment with color. There were splashes of yellow and red on old placemats, turquoise fingerprints on door knobs. I didn't care. It felt like life coming back into the house, and then something unexpected happened. The PTA at her school reached out. They wanted to organize a student-led art show to replace the yearly auction-style fundraiser. Apparently, the blowback from Mira's letter had sparked more than just whispers. It forced some of the faculty and board members to examine how exploitative those fundraisers had become, taking troubled kids' stories and spinning them into digestible performances for donors. They asked Mira if she'd be willing to help design the new event, not as a prop, as a contributor, as a leader. I expected her to say no, but she surprised me again. If it means kids like me get to talk about what they want to share, I want to help. So she joined the student advisory group. They met every Thursday in the library. With the school counselor and a couple of art teachers, they brainstormed ideas, sketched posters, drafted plans for interactive exhibits. It wasn't just about showcasing art anymore. It was about letting kids define how they wanted to be seen. She came home one day, tossed her bag on the couch, and said, "We're calling it the See Me Project." I smiled. That's perfect. Then came the part one hadn't expected at all. Jenna emailed me, not a text note, a social media message, a full email. The subject line read, "For what it's worth." I stared at it for a long time before opening it. I half expected it to be another guilt trip or some polished-up excuse for their behavior. But it wasn't. It was clumsy, and it was honest. She wrote about how she had always felt second to me growing up, how she resented being the fun aunt while I got to be their all parent. She said she didn't realize how bitter she'd become until she saw her own words on the news coming out of a stranger's mouth. She said she'd watched the gallery clip that seeing Mira stand in front of her own work like she belonged there made her feel ashamed and small. She ended with, "I don't expect you to forgive me. I just wanted you to know I finally saw it, and I'm sorry." I didn't respond, not out of cruelty, but because I didn't have the words yet. Or maybe I didn't owe her any, now maybe not ever. Instead, I printed the email and tucked it behind Wyla's folder of affirmations, the one I kept in my nightstand. I didn't show it to her, yet I didn't want to make her carry the weight of someone else's regret one night a week. Before the See Me project was set to launch, I found Mira in the garage. She pulled out an old easel and was working on something she hadn't let me see yet. "Almost done," she said without looking up. "What is it? You'll see." The night of the show arrived. The gymnasium had been transformed, strings of soft light, handwritten notes from students lining the walls, art pinned alongside small placards with thoughts, feelings, pieces of truth. Mira's painting was near the entrance, a tall canvas full of texture and shadow. It showed a hand reaching through water. Fingers spread desperate, but not drowning behind it. Faint and blurred was another hand reaching back. Her placard read, "Even if they don't understand you, you still get to belong to yourself." People stopped, in their tracks. Some read it twice. Some cried, others didn't know what to say, but they really saw her, not as a symbol or a sad story or a lesson in resilience, just her Mira, a whole person with a voice and fire and a name that didn't need explanation after. The show we walked to, the car together in the cool spring air. I could feel how tall she stood beside me, not in height, but in presence. She turned to me suddenly and said, "You think they'll ever really get it?" I shrugged. "I don't know." She smiled. Doesn't matter, over the next few days, life returned to its quiet rhythm. Nothing dramatic. No new confrontations, just the ordinary magic of things finally settling where they should. But inside me, something still simmered. Not with anger anymore. Not even hurt, just a lingering heaviness. The weight of years spent tolerating what should have never been tolerated. A strange kind of grief for the illusion of family I had held on to for so long. I found myself thinking about my mother more than I wanted. Not because I missed her, but because I was starting to realize how much of her voice still lived inside my head. "Don't air dirty laundry, family is everything, stop being so sensitive." All those old phrases, the kind that sound harmless until you realize they were meant to keep you quiet, compliant, small. It had taken watching my daughter stand up for herself publicly and unapologetically to finally unhook those beliefs from my spine. One evening, I was folding laundry in my bedroom while Mira was In the living room working on a new drawing, she'd started listening to podcasts. Ones about art, mental health, social justice. I could hear her pen moving against the paper in short, quick strokes. The sound was oddly soothing. My phone buzzed a notification. From Facebook, a new post in the neighborhood parents group. I clicked without thinking, assuming it was another discussion about parking or lost dogs, but it was a post about Mira, or rather about the side project a mother from her school had written. Just wanted to say how moved I was by the student art show my son. Doesn't talk much about school, but after that night he came home and said, "There's a girl in my class who paints. What I feel thank you to whoever raised her." I read it twice. Then again, my throat tightened. I looked down at the pair of socks I'd been holding and realized I hadn't moved in minutes. Sometimes the affirmations don't come from the people you think you need them from. Sometimes they come from strangers, quietly, unexpectedly, and they heal you in places that apologies never reached. I showed Ula the post later that night. She just looked at it and nodded. She didn't say much. She didn't need to. That same week, her school counselor invited us, both to speak at an upcoming panel about student-led advocacy and creative expression. At first, I hesitated. Me speak about what? I wasn't the one who painted or wrote anything newsworthy. I was just a mom, but the counselor said you gave her the space to become who she is. That matters. So I agreed. The panel was held at a local community center, a modest turnout, teachers, parents, a few folks from the school board. I watched Mira speak. First, calm, articulate, sure of herself in a way that made me both proud and a little stunned. Then it was my turn. I stepped up to the microphone and looked out at the small audience for a second. I felt the old panic. What if I say the wrong thing? What if I embarrass her? But then I saw her sitting in the front row, watching me like I hung the stars. So I told the truth. I told them about the fundraiser, about the way my family framed her pain for applause, about the betrayal that didn't come from strangers. I didn't name names. I didn't need to. I talked about what it meant to raise a child who didn't fit the mold of quiet obedience, about how uncomfortable that made people, about how powerful it was to let her grow anyway. I ended by saying, she taught me that love without protection isn't love. It's performance, and I'll never be part of that show again. There was silence for a moment after I stepped down, then came the clapping. Not loud, but sincere, and enough later, that night, as we were driving home. Mira looked out the window and said, "You looked kind of fierce up there." I laughed. I was nervous. I couldn't tell. Then more quietly, "It felt good watching you stand up there." I reached over and squeezed her hand. It felt good doing it. We didn't talk much after that, just rode home with the windows cracked and the soft buzz of the radio filling the space between us. Not every powerful moment needs a long conversation. Sometimes being side by side is enough. The next few weeks passed without much drama, and that in itself felt like a gift. No unexpected calls from family. No cryptic messages, just regular life grocery runs, school drop-offs, laundry cycles, dinner at the table. It was almost like we were building something new on clean ground this time, not on the shaky foundation of keeping the peace or swallowing our truth, but something real, simple, honest. But even when you cut the toxic parts out of your life, the echoes can linger. Mira had a science project coming up and decided to work on it at the public library. Since it was quieter than home, I dropped her off on a Saturday morning and told her I'd be back in a couple of hours. I was in line at the Safeway deli when my phone rang. Unknown number. Almost let it go to voicemail, but something in me hesitated. I answered, "Hello, Rena, it's me." I knew that voice immediately. My mother, I hadn't heard it in months, and hearing it again was like opening a door. "You thought you'd bolted shut." I know. "Shouldn't be calling," she said quickly. "I just wanted to talk just for a minute." I didn't say anything, she continued. "I saw the segment from the community center panel. Someone posted it online." Of course they did. I didn't call to argue. She added, "I just wanted to say that I didn't realize how far things had gone. I thought I was helping. I really did." Helping, that word again. Always the shield they used to justify the harm, May, I said. And I didn't realize how cold my voice had gotten until I heard it out loud. "You weren't helping. You were rewriting our story to make yourselves look like saints?" There was a pause. On the other end, I know she finally said, "I've been thinking about that night, about what Jenna said about the things I didn't stop. I don't expect you to let me back in. I just needed to say it that I see. Now I didn't respond right away. I wasn't angry. I just didn't know what to do with the sudden tenderness of it all. It felt late, not useless, just deeply late, she added. If you ever want to talk, if Mira ever does, I'd like to listen. That was it. No begging, no pushing. Just that I hung up without making a promise. When I picked Mira up from the library, I didn't mention the call. I wasn't ready to place that burden on her. Not unless she asked. Instead, I asked about her project. She lit up, describing some experiments with seeds and light exposure. I nodded, made the right mum sounds, but my mind was elsewhere. Could people really change? Could someone so blind to the damage they caused finally understand the cost? And even if they could, was that enough later? That night, Mira was on the couch sketching something while watching one of those slow-paced nature documentaries. I made us hot chocolate real cocoa. Not the packet kind, because I'd promised her we'd have a cozy night in. As I handed her the mug, she asked without looking up, "Did she call?" I froze. "Who, Grandma?" I stared at her. "How did you?" She shrugged. I figured she might. I saw the video too. I sat down next to her, unsure of what to say. She said she wanted to talk. I offered cautiously. Said she's sorry. Mira nodded, still sketching. What did you say? Nothing. I listened. Are you going to talk to her again? I don't know. She paused, then looked up at me for the first time. Can I decide for myself if I want to or not? It was such a simple question, and yet it landed like a brick. Of course, I said. She smiled just a little. Okay, I'm not ready. But maybe someday. That was enough. That was more than I ever expected her to say. She went back to sketching. I pulled a blanket over us and we watched the narrator on TV whisper about coral reefs and sea turtles, while outside spring rain tapped softly on the windows. It was one of those nights that doesn't look like much from the outside but feels like everything when you're in it. Spring melted into early summer before I even realized it. The coats went into storage, and the porch light started staying on later and later. Mira finished her school year stronger than I'd seen her in a long time. It wasn't just about grades, it was the way she held herself. Walking through the front doors each morning like she belonged, like she had nothing to prove anymore. The SAY project was officially adopted by the school for the following year. What was meant to be a one-time event was now going to be an annual showcase designed by students, shaped by their voices, and free from the kind of tokenizing that had sparked all this in the first place. They even asked Mira to be on the advisory board as a returning student. I guess I'm the original, she joked one night, over dinner, holding her chopsticks awkwardly over a bowl of teriyaki noodles. You're the blueprint, I said. She smiled, but not the shy, unsure smile I used to see. This one was grounded confidence around. That time, Jenna reached out again. This time, it wasn't an email, it was a letter, a real handwritten letter, online notebook paper like we used to pass in school. It arrived in a plain envelope. No return address, just her neat handwriting scrolled across the front. I hesitated before opening it. It was different from the first message. No defensiveness, no half apologies. It wasn't performative or self-pitying. Just her story about growing up in our house, what it was like being the younger one. The free spirit, the one who wasn't expected to take things seriously, about how her mother's way of loving came with rules and image management, and how for a long time, Jenna thought the only way to stay in May's good graces was to stay useful. She wrote about Mira too. She didn't try to justify what she'd said that night at the fundraiser. She just wrote, I was cruel and made her feel like she didn't belong. I hate that I did that. She ended with, I don't know if I deserve a place in either of your lives. I just wanted you to know that I've been doing the work. I've started therapy. I'm unlearning things I didn't even realize were broken. If you ever want to talk or not talk, I'll respect that. No strings. I put the letter down and sat with it for a long while. I didn't cry. I didn't get angry. I just felt tired and a little sad. Not for me, for her, because I knew exactly what it felt like to finally start waking up to the damage you'd caused or carried, and how lonely that can be. I didn't show the letter to Mira right away. She was preparing for the summer program at the University of Maryland. She'd been accepted into their youth arts residency, one she had quietly applied for months ago. She told me about it only after she got the email that she'd been accepted. I wasn't sure I'd get in, she said, pretending not to be as proud as I knew she was. We drove to the campus together on orientation day, our little Honda humming. Down Route 29. Under a hot June sun, the trees along the parkway were full and green, and I could feel the hum of possibility in the air, like something big was just beginning on campus. She checked in, got her lanyard, and met a few other students in the program. She didn't need me much that day, which was both heartbreaking and thrilling. She was stepping into something on her own, and I had to learn how to let her. When we finally hugged goodbye outside her dorm building, she looked up at me and said, "You think I'm going to be okay here?" "I know you are," I said, trying not to get emotional, "and I think I'll write back to Aunt Jenna. Maybe I'm not sure yet, but I want to think about it." That caught me off guard. "You don't have to," I said quickly. "This is your decision. No pressure." "I know," she said, "but she's trying and that counts for something, right?" I nodded slowly. "It does that night." I went home alone for the first time in what felt like forever. No backpack dropped by the front door. No paintbrushes soaking in the kitchen sink. The silence was sharp at first. The house felt too clean, too quiet. But I didn't fall apart. I lit a candle, poured myself a glass of wine, and opened the folder I kept in my nightstand. The one full of Isla's affirmations, scribbled notes. And now, Jenna's letter gently folded and tucked inside. I reread one of the notes. Mira had written months ago, a little postage she'd left stuck to my bathroom mirror during a rough week. "I love that. You listen. Sometimes that's the most radical thing you can do. Just listen. Not fixed, not argue, just witness someone's truth and hold space for it." That's what I was learning to do now for Mira. For myself, and maybe slowly one day, for Jenna too. The house stayed quiet for most of the summer. I didn't realize how much noise we made, just the two of us, doors closing, chairs shifting, Mira humming to herself when she painted or talking back to the TV while watching old movies without her there. The silence was something I had to get used to all over again. But I also started noticing things I hadn't before I started reading. Again, not just skimming through articles or half-reading emails, but actually sitting down with a book and turning pages for no other reason than to enjoy it. I cooked meals that didn't involve boxed pasta or air-fried vegetables. I went for walks, real walks, not errands disguised as exercise. I even took an art class at the community center, just one acrylics on canvas. I was terrible at it, but that wasn't the point. It felt good to have time again. Not because I didn't miss her, I did fiercely, but because I was remembering who I was outside of being her mom. She called every few days from campus. Never long, never dramatic, just check-in stories about the girl in her dorm who painted upside down, or the guest speaker who cried while talking about losing her brother to addiction, and how art brought her back from the edge. Mira loved the classes, loved the space. The freedom. She sounded older every time she didn't bring up Jenna again, and I didn't push. But then, a few weeks before the program was set to end, I got an envelope in the mail from Mira. Inside was a letter handwritten in that curved, careful script of hers, the same writing I used to see on spelling worksheets, now flowing across 3 full pages. I wrote back to her. She said I didn't say anything, just what I needed to say. I told her how it made me feel and that it's going to take a long time to trust her again. But I also told her, appreciate that she's trying, and that trying isn't the same as fixing, but it's a start. I don't know if we'll ever be close, but I think I'm okay with that. I don't need her to be someone she's not. I just need her to mean it. When she shows up, I read those words 3 times. Before setting the letter down, my hands were trembling, but not from anger, from the quiet power of a child growing into someone more thoughtful and whole than I could have imagined at her age. She was healing and not just surviving, thriving, inch by inch on her own terms. A few days later, I got a text from Jenna. It wasn't anything dramatic, just, "Thank you for letting her write to me. I'll carry her words the way they deserve to be carried." I didn't respond. Some things don't need a reply. Some things just need time. By the time I picked Isla up from her dorm at the end of the program, she looked like she'd grown 2 in taller and a year older. Her hair was a little longer, her arms tanned from campus walks. She hugged me tightly and then stepped back, looking me in the eye with a new steadiness. "You okay?" I asked. She grinned. "Better than okay." On the way home, we stopped at the same faux place we always did, same booth, same order. It felt like coming home in the best way, not because we were escaping anything, but because we'd both done some growing outside of each other, and now we were returning not as mother and fragile child, but as 2 people who had learned a lot about themselves that night, After she unpacked and showered, I found her sitting in the garage again, same old easel, but a new canvas starting something. I asked, she nodded. Yeah, I've got an idea. What is it? She tilted her head, studying the blank canvas. I want to paint something about what forgiveness actually feels like. Not the sweet kind, the real kind. I smiled and leaned against the doorframe. That's a heavy subject, she shrugged. So as growing up, I left her to it. It hit me later that night as I was brushing my teeth how far we'd come since that school fundraiser, how that one cruel night had shattered something, and how what were built in its place was sturdier, quieter, and far more beautiful. August slipped by gently, like a tired tide rolling back into the sea. School was starting again. Mira would be entering 8th grade now, and the shift in her was impossible to miss. She didn't dread it like she used to know. Sulking the night before, no begging to stay home. She was still quiet in the mornings, but it was a calm kind of quiet, focused, steady. The night before her first day, she laid out her clothes, neatly picked a notebook she liked, and added one of her little affirmations on the inside cover. I get to choose how people see me and how I see myself. That morning when I dropped her off, she stepped out of the car, turned and said, "Hey, thanks for last year, it stopped me." She didn't have to explain, we both knew what she meant. I just nodded and said, "Go make some trouble, the good kind." She grinned and disappeared into the crowd that afternoon. I got home from work and saw an unfamiliar car in front of the house. Not a threat, just unexpected. I parked and walked up, squinting into the sun. It was Jenna. She was sitting on the hood of her car, envelope and hand sunglasses pushed up on her head, clearly rehearsing something in her mind. Her posture said nerves, maybe fear. I didn't speak at first. She looked up and offered a small smile. Hey, I answered, flat, but not angry. I was in the neighborhood, she said, then quickly corrected herself. Okay, I wasn't. I came here on purpose. I leaned against the poor railing and folded my arms. While she looked down at the envelope, I wrote her another letter. Just shorter this time. I didn't want to mail it. I didn't know if I'd ever get a chance to hand it over in person. I stayed quiet. She doesn't have to read it. She can burn it, rip it up, ignore it. I just wanted to say it with my actions, not just my words. She looked at me, then really looked, and I wanted to say to you, thank you for not keeping her pain locked in some dark corner of the house like we were taught to do. You let her speak. And because of that, she's stronger than either of us ever were at that age. There was something vulnerable in her face. I hadn't seen in years. No shame, not guilt, just sincerity. I walked over and took the envelope from her hand. I'll give it to her, I said. Jenna nodded. That's all. Yask. She turned, walked to her car, and before she got in, added, tell her I'll be around, no pressure, no expectations, just here. Then she left. When Mira got home, I handed her the letter. I didn't ask if she was going to read it. I didn't ask what it said later. That was hers to decide. All I said was, it's from Jenna. She dropped it off. Herself, Mira took it and disappeared. Into her room about an hour later, I heard music playing from behind her door. Soft, rhythmic, a song she used to love but hadn't listened to in a while. I didn't knock, I didn't intrude, but I took it as a sign. That weekend we went to the farmer's market. Together, it had become our ritual Saturday mornings with paper bags, fresh bread, sunflowers, and Mira insisting on getting way too many peaches. We passed a booth selling handmade journals. Mira picked one up, flipped through it, and said, maybe I'll use this one for letters I never send. I didn't ask what she meant. I just said, that's a good use for it. She bought the journal and tucked it under her arm like it was something precious back at home, as she peeled peaches at the kitchen counter, juice dripping onto her wrists. She said, I'm not ready to see her, but I think I might be one day. I nodded, you get to choose when or if, and she said, that's the part one didn't know I had a choice in before. That was the full circle moment, not forgiveness, not reunion, not some dramatic family scene, just that realizing she had a choice, realizing her voice wasn't borrowed or conditional. It was hers later that night, as I was tidying up. I noticed the envelope Jenna had brought, opened, carefully folded, and now tucked inside Mira's new journal. Noon had to say anything. We were moving forward, one small, honest step at a time.